Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of A Handful of Hope. I am so happy and grateful to have Sarah with us here today, who was a physician living a nature-starved, hectic lifestyle until a walrus entered her life and changed everything. She is trained at the Martha Beck Institute and Michael Harner's Foundation for Shamanic Studies and is author of Swimming with Elephants. She lives in northern Minnesota. For more, visit followyourfeelinggood.com. Sarah, welcome, and thank you so very much for being here.
So glad to be here, Jesse. I'm so glad we got connected.
Me too. I've really enjoyed our conversations before this, and I'm excited to expand on them today. And you were just telling me beforehand that you have a new book coming out that has an error in it.
Does. So this book came out Monday, and Monday was a pretty heavy day. There's just so much pain going on, and I wasn't sure if it was good to launch a book that day, but I sort of sat in meditation and prayed about it, and it felt like, well, it's a book to help. It's an inspiration, it's a book for helpers and healers. And so, I thought, well, let's do it. So I got an email yesterday. Somebody's like, yeah, it's a daily meditation book. So each page has like a day on it, right? They're like, I went to page June 4th and there's no June 4th. Like there's absolutely no, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'm thinking that must be like a publisher's error. I mean, we had gone through this a million times. And I'm like, oh my gosh, sure enough, I go look at all the books, no June 4th. And this book is, I'm a former physician turned shamanic healer. So I work with spirit animals. And on the cover, you can see Alice, my elephant, who's my spirit helper. So she helped me to co-write this book. And I was like, Alice, what's going on? So this morning, I finally had a moment to pull the original Word document to be like, did I miss June 4th? Or where did this error happen? And I have to read you what it said. It was just very funny to me. So the format of the book is there's a message from Alice that I sort of channel by visiting her on a shamanic journey. Then there's a message from me. And then there's sort of some questions and a prayer. One of those books you sit with your coffee and meditate with. So the theme is be transparent. Alice says, let your so-called defects shine. This is what makes you so fucking kick-ass. Let others see right through you. Laugh together at those neurotic tendencies. Confess why you kept your darkest secrets quiet in the first place. That fear of flying, literally, own it. It's disarming to your fellow humans and invites them to be blissfully authentic right alongside you. And then from me, my part of the page, I mean, it's like, you can't make this stuff up, people. Alice is like, all I can think is she's just rolling. I haven't had a chance to check in with her, but I imagine she's just like having a good laugh on this. And the message from me is, when I was first diagnosed with ADHD, I was filled with shame. Everything that I'd read about the disorder made me feel inferior. I hired an ADHD coach who told me I shouldn't tell my partners at the hospital about it or they could fire me. This was when I was practicing medicine. What? So I'm supposed to hide this? Around that time, Alice, my elephant, appeared on the scene and reminded me that all of the ADHD characteristics I had were also a gift. I was on Earth to do a special kind of work, and this was such a relief. Everything that was wrong with me was what was right with me. Then I began to talk to others about my ADHD, and it felt so freeing not to keep it to myself. And the thing is, the invitation is share your vulnerability with another person and let them really see you. And the prayer is, dear God, take away my fear of being who I am with others. Help me live free. And I just thought, wow, this is like, it was kind of like a big healing for me to get that, because the horror of making a mistake in something that, a published book that will be out there for eternity. Thank goodness we're in the print on demand. I can go upload a corrected file tomorrow, and the problem will be solved. But it's like, you and I have had these conversations about really keeping death as a close companion and why grief is so important. And it often these huge losses that we have in our life wake us up to what are we here to do, and what is life all about? And I think that perfectionism really will keep us, or that fear of screwing up or fear of making a mistake will keep us from doing our most important work. And we were just talking this morning about, well, how are we responding to what's going on in the world? And we're just talking a few days after the riots have just started to settle down across the country. And this just earlier this week, I joined the NAACP in my community. And when I looked, they said you could join a committee. And so I have sent an email to join the committee. And what I realized as I was doing that, it's like, I think before this, I've been scared to even reach out because I didn't think anybody would want me around, because I felt there's so much tension, and I thought, well, it's not my place to serve on such a committee. But now, because of everything that's happened, the NAACP came and said, well, maybe they've been saying this for years, I don't know, but they just said, please join us. And I was like, oh, I would love to join you. So it feels like what's happened in this country is this amazing opportunity, although it's come at a great price, but this amazing opportunity to learn and to connect and to enter into those scary conversations, or maybe not scary, but those difficult conversations about what is wrong and how can we go about repairing it together. You know, how as white people, how can I be, or a white person, how can I be an ally to people of color?
You know, I don't think I've shared this with you, Sarah, but I do not believe in coincidences. I don't believe that there is just, I feel like if coincidences were real, we would all be just the luckiest people in the world, because it seems like some of the greatest things that we have, we're so quick to dismiss as coincidence. But when you look at mathematical improbability of some of the greatest experiences we've had, I mean, it's really defying the statistical probability of even winning the lottery, which is like 1 in 48 million or something like that. And as I'm listening to you share, I think how extraordinary that is, that one page ended up as it was. It escaped not only as you were writing, but through the editing process, and how many times you maybe looked over, if you had other people or editors or whatever look it over. And it talks about what it speaks to is it speaks to vulnerability, authenticity, you know, being able, and then how relevant that is to some of the things you and I were talking about beforehand that we've been just sitting with. And how often there are things that we know we should say or do. There are actions that we know we need to take, but we will be hesitant on it because we are so fearful of judgment, maybe rejection, maybe that what we have to say or offer isn't enough, or we won't be heard, or we won't be accepted and loved and made to feel safe as we take those uncomfortable steps onto whatever journey it is. I think that and so it ends up happening, it seems, for so many of us, is we succumb to that. We succumb to that, it needing to be perfect. We need to have the red carpet, and it needs to be dusted, and everything needs to be so crystal clear that we need to just be able to go, okay, you know, the breadcrumbs are right there, I will go. And I think that maybe for a lot of us, it's the breadcrumbs are right there and they've been there the whole time. It's just, instead of looking at the breadcrumbs, we're looking at these invisible monsters. Yeah. And making the trail, you know, it's kind of like that story. Gosh, I'm trying to remember what Disney show it was, or maybe it wasn't even Disney, but I remember there was this cartoon, I think, and when I was a kid, and there was this forest that looked so scary, and you know, they do it where they have the trees kind of look darkened out, and you have the eyes peering through, and it was, and very much in that story, it was perceived as being scary. Nobody wanted to go near it. And then something happens where one of the main characters has to go into the forest. In the scary forest, you know, there's all this ominous music, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it turns out that everything in the forest was actually quite kind, quite nice. They were loving, they were supportive, they were nurturing, they were so desperate for people to come and visit them and to see them all this time. But it never happened because there was this outside perception of, oh, there's these monsters here. You know, they never even saw the breadcrumbs that were right in front of them.
It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I had a very extremely difficult experience in a plant medicine ceremony. So this was not me leading a ceremony, but I was part of another ceremony in which I had a very very difficult experience. So difficult, in fact, that when I got home, I contacted a dear friend who's a shamanic healer, and I just said, oh, it was so dark and so scary. I didn't know what to do. And it just left me feeling like there was something undone that I needed to do. And she's like, Sarah, you need to really lean into that. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right, I do. I was like, I don't know what that means. So I went to visit Alice and I said, my friend Koea told me I need to lean into this very dark and very difficult experience. And Alice said, here's what you're going to do. She's like, you're going to go get some of these Chinese, those red, little magical red Chinese lucky money envelopes, and you're going to put $10 in each. You're going to get $500 and you're going to put $10 in each one. We're going to bless all that money. And then you're going to go in your car and you're going to go downtown to kind of there's a few streets in our town where there's a lot of people wandering that are maybe intoxicated, maybe, homeless. And I've seen, people fighting and difficult things, and I haven't wanted to look at them. I've wanted to look away. Like, I don't want to, it's been very hard. It was hard for me to consider I just don't want this to be happening. This just, it upset me. Anyway, and they told me I should go up to these people, find them one at a time, go up to them and tell them that I'm feeling lucky to be alive, which was very true at the time, and to hand them the money and say, this is blessed money and I want you to have it. I was like, okay, I will do that. So I got the money, did the envelopes, got in my car, went downtown. Of course, the minute I drive in, there's 5 people loitering around a parking structure. I'm like, oh, they're my people. I get out and I go up to one of the people who's there and I'm like, hi, I'm feeling lucky to be alive and I would like you to have this blessed money. And the guy's kind of and he takes the envelope and he looks at me and he opens it and he's just like, can I hug you?
Wow.
And I'm like, sure. And so we're hugging. And then meanwhile, the other people, you can see, they're kind of like, what's going on? And then this one younger woman stands up. She was kind of on the ground with another friend. And she comes up to me and she said, my mother died last night. And I've been sitting here wondering, asking and praying for a sign that she is okay. And seeing you and what just happened, I know that she's okay. You are that sign. She's like, can I have a hug? And so we start hugging. We're both crying. Meanwhile, around us, all these other people who I get the impression know each other, but maybe haven't hugged, they all start hugging each other.
Wow.
I mean, by this point, I'm just so here are all these people that I'm afraid of, that I haven't wanted to look at because it's just so painful to acknowledge, things aren't our community, not everybody is safe, not everybody is taken care of, and all these uncomfortable feelings, but just realized all that was there is love. Then I decided, well, we all wrapped up that amazing interaction. Then I went to this gas station where I had encountered a lot of really scary situations. When I say a lot, twice I've been there and there were people hepped up on drugs, screaming at the person behind the counter. So I knew I had to go there too. So I went there. I wasn't eating in the front, so I went to the back by the coolers, and there were 2 guys and a girl there, and both the guys had gang tattoos, the kind of people that really scare me. And I just said, hello, feeling lucky to be alive. I'd like you to have this blessed money. And the guy takes the envelope and he goes, what's your name? Because I've never even bothered to say my name. And I go, I'm Sarah. And he's like, I'm Orlando. It's so nice to meet you. And then the 3 of us had this eye contact that was just it was looking into the universe. There was so much love and I can't even describe. It was so powerful. And so what I really realized from that experience is the things that I'm scared of, behind it is only love. It's just all this immense love and acceptance. And I'm not saying go on the street and but in my situation, that was what I needed to do to get through that fear of connecting with the other, what scared me so much. And I think this is not to connect that directly with NAACP, but I've always thought, well, you won't want me around because how could I help you? I don't know how to help, or I could screw up and say the wrong thing, or maybe I am, the enemy and you wouldn't want me around anyway. But to realize that if we can be curious, maybe there's just only love everywhere that we look.
I read this book last year. There's a series on Netflix called Mindhunters, and it's about basically these FBI guys who create this unit in the FBI called Behavioral Science Unit with the idea of studying serial killers and figuring out what makes them tick, why they do what they do, with the intention of maybe if they can understand them, then they'll be able to thwart others happening in the future, right? And this is at the time when we would just assign labels and designations to people like that as monsters, animals, which then of course gives us permission to not have to look at our own, see the humanity in them and not have to look at ourselves, so maybe the monster in ourselves. Well, I didn't realize that the show had been based on a book. And so I read the book last year, and the author was the founder, I think essentially like the founder of this behavioral science unit. And eventually when it got started off, he's getting all this pushback, no funding. And he spent thousands of hours over the course of the next several years interviewing basically what we would designate as the worst of the worst, people who did the most horrific and awful things. And started going through and profiling the behavioral mechanisms, what motivated, what was the origin of it, why did they do this, were they born that way, answering those questions that we had. And you would see that from many of them, there's thematics like intense sexual abuse, being neglected as a child, maybe in some of them they were even tortured. So there was violence installed into them early on, plus whatever else goes into it. The point in sharing that story is at the end of the book, I'm waiting for the big reveal. What can we all do? What's the solution to this, right? Because he's got all these hours, and this is with the Charles Mansons, all those ones who were the prolific, like if you could think of a famous serial killer really during that time, he probably sat with them. And this was somebody, people who had been serial killers 60s, 70s, 80s, those time periods. And I'm thinking there's going to be this huge, basically dissertation about this and that and the behavioral psychology and all these things and what we need to do and how we can anticipate and what are the patterns we have to break down. And he ends it by saying, what my conclusion is with having sat with, and I'm paraphrasing what exactly he said, with having sat with all these people and having spent thousands of hours interviewing these people, is that the only way to ever stop this from happening and lessen the chances of this being worse in the future is we all need to learn essentially to love more. And I mean, I'm getting chills right now as I'm saying that. I had to put the book down. I started crying because I was literally like, son of a bitch. There it is again, even in the most extremes of extremes of extremes, like to spend that time with them and realize that in most of these most vicious, and this isn't justifying anything that they did, but to realize that as he's sitting there and going through and peeling back the layers of the label of a monster or an animal or those kinds of things and stripping it down to the raw humanity that is in maybe all of us, he saw these hurt little boys, hurt little girls that were so desperately wanting to try to be loved. And they had become so angry and so almost vengeful because it was deprived of them, that they then took courses of action in ways to try to perform to get love or to try to take it away from others because they were deprived of it. And it was just, I had to sit with it so much. And and it seems that's so thematic, right, with it all, is like when we really do get to the humanity of all of us, whether it's somebody going through a different race, different religion, they have tattoos all over them, they're the homeless people on the street, they're people in different countries, everybody, we're all searching for the same thing.
Yeah, and I think when I just saw, there was a beautiful poster yesterday that was, talking about George Floyd in one of the protests. And it's like, when he called out mama, he called out to, this will make me cry. I mean, he called out to all the mothers across the world, because we all have a mother. And there's been so many beautiful stories about people are like, you accept my little boy when he is Black and he's 4 and he's adorable, but somehow 10 years later, now he's 14, he's 16, he's 18, you treat him in a totally different way. You see him as dangerous, you see him as a threat, something to be someone to be wary of. And I think that event, as horrible as it was, you know, it disgusted people on such a level. And it was like, we can no longer hide from this. This is real. It's happening every day. And yeah, and we can't afford to be afraid to get involved. We can no longer afford to be afraid to speak up or to be an ally or put yourself between, you know, to really step forward when you see something happening. You know, you could be saving a life. I've read so many stories this week about how, you know, something was happening and the person had no power, the person of color, and a white person stepped in and said, "Oh, you're confused, police. You've got the wrong person. This person is a good person." And then the police, you know, backed off, or whatever it was, you know, that these allies came in. And yeah, we can no longer afford to sit on our hands or be quiet or wait or to look, you know, we have to risk looking like a fool or getting it wrong. And it's okay. Like, I think that's what, you know, it's like the last thing you would do is publish a book and get it wrong. You know, I've been trying not to get it wrong my whole life, but it's not the end of the day. And in fact, this was a total gift. So maybe in getting it wrong, you know, we get it right eventually, because to not try or to not follow that inner guidance to take some sort of action is to basically agree to die. I mean, I hate to be so dramatic, but I feel that way more and more, that when we're not living our truth, we are dying a little inside. And that doesn't just affect us, it affects our best friends, our children, our families, our communities. Yeah.
I spoke with this really incredible woman yesterday who teaches sales and sales psychology. And we were talking about first impressions because we always talk about that. She was saying that, you know, many of us, we think the first impression is about, again, paraphrasing, getting it perfect. So making sure you're completely clean shaven, well polished, you know, button up suit, and your shoes are immaculate. And she was saying that, you know, we're trying so hard to get it perfect. But she said, really, the most important thing that you could do with making a first impression is really think about how you want to make that person feel when you leave. When you leave that room, what do you want them to remember about you? Do you want them to remember that your shoes were shiny, or do you want them to remember that you looked them in the eye and you were kind? And I shared that with you because I love and appreciate that you shared about the imperfection, because I feel like we spend so much time trying to get things perfect, getting our books perfect, getting our speech perfect, getting our social media perfect. Like, God, half the stuff that goes out there is 3 times filtered, and it takes 2 apps to make a simple little photo happen, because we're trying so hard. And like, it's not that we're trying to present perfection as we're trying to cover up our flaws and our blemishes, because it's almost like saying that, hey, these aren't enough and they won't be accepted. And, you know, to hear someone share, just between you and I, you know, the published author who made a fuck up, but like, how, you know, perfectly is that fuck up, in that the message is so relevant to it. And to know that, you know, it's okay, and that there's a lesson to take from it. And you know what? Like, maybe that lesson that takes away from that is the most important lesson that even comes out of the whole book for a lot of people. Because I think about how many people I talk to every day who, you know, and it's been studied too, one of the biggest goals shared by all humanity is to write a book. But people don't write a book because they're afraid they're not a good enough writer. They don't know how to write. They're afraid that it won't be perfect. They're afraid it won't be. And so to have a book now that comes out, there's flaws in it. It's almost like, in a way, if people are open to it, it gives them permission to say, hey, it's okay. Like, whatever's inside of you, put it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, it's just, it is, that's you, and that's fine, and that's good. And that's the message.
Yes. And we're going to give people like a printable page that they can like scotch tape into the back of the book. And I think, how precious is that, you know? And yeah, we're going to fix up the book. We're going to make it perfect for the next 500 people that buy the book. But it's like, it reminds me of, I think it's I don't know if it's an Islamic tradition, but in the Persian, like in the rugs, like an ancient Persian, I don't know if they still do this. I bet they do, but I'd always heard this story that when they weave a rug, they always leave an imperfection, like they pointedly put in a wrong stitch or a wrong color thing, because they don't ever want to try to be perfect, because that's not their job. They're human. That's God's job.
Mm.
I love that, because I think that's probably been one of my biggest lessons and most freeing lessons in the last few years. It's just like, all I'm here to do is make the best effort I can, and the rest it's like an offering. And God, if you want, if you want this to go well, it's up to you, because I mean, I've done everything that I could, and I've put my heart and soul in it. And after that, it's like the results aren't up to me. How it turns out isn't up to me. Yeah, and I think this is such for me, a God moment. Alice is obviously, just having a lot of fun. And it's like, that's how the spirits are. They have this enormous sense of humor, about, you thought you were controlling everything, but guess what? We just pulled a fast one on you, and we pulled a fast one on 4 of you. Like 4 people looked at that book. So I couldn't be, it's just thank you.
Sarah, you have a really fascinating journey where you go into the medical profession, and correct me if I'm misrepresenting this, and you have a hard time being in that space of with people passing away. So you decide you want to go into pathology part of it, right?
Right.
And then you do that, and there's something calling to you, and so you start exploring coaching, and then you go into shamanic studies, and you do these kind of self retreats and go to India and all these types of things. So you come across to me as this constant seeker. And I'm wondering, in all of your seeking, has there been a most significant life lesson or awareness or aha that you've come to through your journeys that might be worth sharing with others?
Yeah, probably one of the most profound lessons I got was in a Turkish spa, which I don't tell that story in the book, but a friend and I were in Istanbul, as one is. Now it's difficult to go there. There's a lot of stuff going on, and we've got the virus. And my mother had told us, well, if you ever get to Istanbul, you should go to this Turkish spa, and it's a very special thing where they scrub you, right? So we went to this place, and we were getting ready to go downstairs to the spa place to wait for our turn. And the lady was like, oh, you have clothes on, like you don't want to wear clothes. And we were like, oh, okay. So we took off all our clothes, and we had this like towel we wrapped around ourselves. So we go to the door, the door flies open, and all this steam comes out, and this woman just kind of pulls us in, and we're like, oh my gosh. And these very strong women with they're all wearing clothes. They have like black athletic bras on and stuff. And we're just like, okay. And we're like, okay, we're ready to go in. And we're just like, okay, casting away the towel. And we go into this amazing marble dome. I mean, it's like this incredible Byzantine architecture, full sunlight. I mean, everybody in there has like full on underwear on. Well, my friend and I we're like, I'm really horrified. And I'm like, oh my God, like we're breaking the rule. And the lady's like, don't worry about it. Just get, she like, nobody can speak any English. We can't speak any Turkish. So whatever. They fling us on the stones. We heat up. They're scrubbing us down. So anyway, I'm getting there, and the lady's starting to scrub me. She's like, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is really fun. And then the lady's like, in the loudest voice possible. I mean, it was probably heard all the way to Timbuktu. She's like, lady. And I'm like, what is she yelling at me for? And she's like, relax. She just screamed it at me and all of a sudden I realized like my entire body was like, because I was just terrified again that I was screwing up, that I broke the rule, I did something wrong. And suddenly I just was like, okay, I'm just gonna relax. And that's when I started enjoying the experience. And when it was over, I mean, they exfoliated like 16 layers of your skin. You feel like a baby, and then they kind of wrap you in this cloth, and you feel like a newborn. And I just realized like that is a repeating lesson in my life. Just relax, just let the goodness come in. Because when I'm tense and worried and afraid I'm gonna make a mistake, it's just all this ways we cut off all the goodness that's trying to get to us. So I think that's probably my number one recurring is relax. Allow we're soaking in this, we're marinating in a stew of goodness, if we can just let it in. The lilacs are blooming, people are sharing their story. There's so much amazing stuff happening right now amongst the pain, amongst the difficulty, like just, and if you relax, a lot of things just go a lot better. I've
Yeah.
learned.
God, there's like this beautiful metaphor in that too. I'm hearing with it's like here you are, you're literally stripped down to your nakedness for
Yes.
all to see, and there's this tension that comes up, but it's really much like I think of our nakedness in the sense of again, it's withholding our stories, it's withholding our voice, it's withholding what's on our heart, it's withholding because we're so afraid of how others will judge us, how we're going to be perceived by others. And so here we're going into these experiences that we want to do, and we're tensed up and we're missing out on the experience because we're so afraid of the judgment that we're not even giving ourselves the gift of the experiment, the experiment.
Yes, totally. And you can miss out on everything because you're just caught up here and worried about what everybody thinks of you. And nobody cares. That's the thing. That's the recurring lesson too. Nobody cares. Everybody, most people, like those wonderful people I had never met hanging out at the parking garage, they just want, I can't actually remember a time I felt more loved and accepted and received, I don't even know these people.
Wow.
Who am I? Some scary lady coming over like with a little red
With
envelope. I should have had a warning person go ahead, like this lady coming up to you. Yeah, so I'd say that's a big one. Another one I'll just share from a medicine woman in Peru. It was a profound, again, I was naked. It always seems to involve getting naked somehow, but we went to this medicine woman in Peru and we had to soak one at a time. We all stripped down and then she plunked us into this very deep vat of really hot water that had all these herbs and flowers, and it was a cleansing, a limpia, which is like where your soul and your spirit gets cleansed. And she was singing and praying over me, and then at the end she just said to me, Sarah, there's been a lot of sadness in your family for a very long time, and now it's time to be happy. And that was it. It's kind of like, yeah, things aren't easy. And, I think later she said to us in Spanish somehow, like, it's a shit show out there, people. But when you go back home, smile, sit up straight and laugh. Because we're never going to, nothing is ever going to be perfect, but it is our job to like bring joy, to shine, and to just hold that space, that, the possibility that things are okay. And especially to do that for those who are struggling and suffering or in pain, is to just be there, show up with all of your presence. And so I think those three things: you relax, sit up, breathe, smile, bring yourself to everything, show up. That's what I tell my kids all the time. I'm just like, all you need to do is show up. You don't have to do it perfectly, but if you don't show up, it's kind of a disappointment. You'll be disappointed with yourself.
Sarah, we only have time for another question. I could continue talking forever, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I've read almost all of your book, Swimming with Elephants. I think I have about 30 pages or so left. And I remember, and I don't want to misquote it, but I think you said something essentially that you had this experience and it was a reminder that peace is always available.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering maybe if you wouldn't mind just expanding that and to finish up here, because I think it was the context that was so beautiful. And the way I read it, the way I interpreted it was, and I'll share too, that I had a conversation with a client the other day about how much they want to feel at peace. And we had this whole discussion about the inside out approach, whereas most of us try to seek out peace from the outside in. And we make peace contingent on behavior changes in others versus making peace first about accountability with a behavior change within ourselves, and then changing how we interact with others. I think very much in this story like you shared with the people in the garage thing, that was a very, like, I can imagine like there was not peace when you would go by them, and then you changed your inner and then an outer action, and then it gave you not only peace but love. So I'm wondering if you might just maybe touch on briefly what that means to you when you put that in there, that peace is always available.
Yeah, and I don't remember what episode of the story, because I'm trying to remember, there's so many different stories in the
Yeah.
book, where that could be a conclusion that I made. I think one thing is when I got back from India, and this is maybe maybe you hear this from a lot of pilgrims, people who take a very long journey looking for something, seeking something. And sorry, my phone started buzzing. And when I got back from India, I realized that, everything that I was looking for was right there. It was always there. It's just that I needed that perspective. I think I had to go and find out something. And that was sort of the end of my seeking in India, because I had a very deep experience where I realized that I was done seeking, and now it was time for me to share my treasure that I found on the hero's journey, right? And to learn how to share your treasure is a process. But I think peace is always there. It's just a matter of, as Rumi says, removing the barriers that exist that keep us from experiencing peace. And, of course, you can do it with meditation. That was very hard for me to sit in still meditation to connect with peace. So one of the things that really helped me, I started 10 years ago, was the drumming practice, which is essentially shamanic journeying, which is where you alter your consciousness using a drum beat. And the drum, it's a particular beat. I do have a drum here, but I won't get it out. Anyways, it's sort of this beat, like when we beat like that, what happens is our brain goes into theta, which is this sort of betwixt and between place. It's not deep sleep and it's not wide awake. It's like REM. So it's what we call a light trance, or we might call it a dream state. Anyway, when I did that to go visit Alice and other helping, loving, compassionate spirits, I think I experienced peace for the first time that I could remember in my adult life, like absolute peace, absolute acceptance, absolute love. And I mean, I was there for 15 minutes and I came back and I was like, whoa, I don't know what that was, but that was good. And then I thought, well, maybe that's crazy. Maybe I'm making it up. I mean, I had my mind went wild trying to understand it because it was so extraordinary. But then I just decided, well, I don't care if I understand it. I'm just going to keep going back. And that started to help me learn what is peace, and that peace is actually the same thing as power. And it's not, I always thought power would be like, I don't know, like, you see people on, like you see ISIS on, Saturday morning cartoons, like, and there's,
yeah.
But for me, what I learned in visiting with my spirits is power is that it's like that sitting with that stillness inside of you where you're just so calm and you are content, even if, everything is burning to the ground. You have a sensibility of being anchored into something much greater than yourself. And so I feel like that's always there now. And it's just a matter of me having to remove the barriers to it. Or sometimes things just I get so out of whack that I go on a journey, which I do probably multiple times a week, to go visit Alice or another helping spirit to just ask for help. And that may sound loony, and trust me, if you had told me that's what I would be talking about now 20 years ago, I would have been like, what? That's not possible. But that's the thing about life. It's such an exciting adventure, and you never know where it's going to take you next.
Everyone, wow, what a journey this was today. You're going to want to rewatch, re-listen, take some notes, sit with it, meditate with it, contemplate with it, marinate in it. Boy, I love that visual you gave us, marinating in the love. This was such a beautiful journey of not Sarah's journey, but the human spirit journey, and the journey of one that maybe we can all invite ourselves to go on to. All of us have those folks in the garage who we maybe feel uncomfortable to look over at because we find ourselves casting our judgments and thinking different things, or the people at the gas station who have the tattoos. But what would happen if we honored that voice in our heart with any of those tattooed faced people in our life and trusted in that and met them from a place of love? What might happen? What might happen if we allowed our stories to be published, even if there's a little fuck up or two in there? Not because we're trying to be perfect, but because we're trying to be authentic to who we are in our story, and realize that maybe our stories aren't perfect. maybe our journeys aren't perfect, and that's what makes it perfectly okay, and that's what makes you perfectly you. The idea that in all the seeking over the last, it sounds like 20 plus years of it, that we can come away with these key examples of relaxing, letting go, and sitting up straight and smile, that even when we find ourselves vulnerable with our nakedness, whether that's literally or metaphorically, that we're doing it for an experience, and we may find ourselves tensing up and resisting. But it's in letting go of the resistance that we can often open ourselves up to love and learning. And it's in the place of love and learning that we often might find our connection, greater purpose, greater sense of self, and maybe even a greater sense of belonging. This story that we did today took us on a journey that included elephants and serial killers, with a common theme of love and all wanting to be love, all desiring love, and all seeking love. And I think it's quite appropriate today maybe to say that I love you, and I send love to all of you. And Sarah, I love so much for what you shared today. I love you for what you show, how you show up in the world, and your stories that you share, and the gifts that you shared with us today. I thank you, and I deeply appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Jesse. Like, what a beautiful thing. Like, what if we said that to everybody? Like, I mean, just start to say it to everybody. And that includes, what if we tried to say that to everybody, even if we said it silently?
Yeah.
Wow. Could be cool. I'm going to play with that today.
Yeah, please. And then share with me and let me know what comes up. I'm excited to hear.
I will.
All right, everybody. We will see you next time on another edition of A Handful of Hope. Bye-bye.